Bernie, John Sutton, trade unionist. You got through that whole talk about the Australian economy without using the S word, the long S word, that is, superannuation. Now, being the face, I think, of certainly industry super, and knowing you well, I think you do see superannuation as a, I don't know whether we call it a new tool in the kit bag or an important asset that we have at our disposal, I'll use that expression, here in Australia, something that wasn't around 25 years ago, the accumulation of capital we now have in our domestic economy. So can you reflect a bit on where, you know, that tool, if I call it that, in the kit bag, how important that is in terms of managing our economy going forward?
Yes, John, I think there should be a spot for it in the toolkit. And when Warwick was talking about the possibility of sustained terms of trade gains over into the future and what might be done with the proceeds, I was thinking that I hope we don't make the same mistake or fail to pick up the opportunities that we failed to pick up over the last few years when those enormous terms of trade gains flowed into the economy and in large part were dissipated by tax cuts, which boosted consumption, which in part required the Reserve Bank to run around and pick up behind the government. This was a period when monetary and fiscal policies weren't working as well as, or weren't as well coordinated as they might be and as they need to be as more and more challenges loom. But there would have been an opportunity, there was an opportunity then to channel part of this largesse from the terms of trade gains, not into tax cuts as such, but into superannuation, to do something about boosting that 9% to 12%. 9% is adequate for some people to provide a decent retirement income, but it's not nearly enough for very large numbers of people, and large numbers of people on lower incomes, lower account balances that haven't had a long exposure to the 9%, who are women who have been in and out of the workforce and don't have a good deal of exposure. And for lots of people who, because they're going to, many young people now coming into the workforce are going to spend almost as much of their life in retirement as they are in the workforce. They're going to run out of retirement income unless there's some adequate provision, self-provision for this. And moving on from the 9% to a higher figure, 12% or whatever, is good policy, should be an important policy objective, is in the kind of framework that I have. And if those terms of trade gains continue, as I think Warwick was suggesting they might, that would provide an opportunity to make some real progress in that area. At the same time, I would have to say that the sequencing of changes here is important. The present system is very costly to tax revenue. Treasury estimates of the tax expenditures involved in superannuation come to about 25 billion a year, and that's down from about 30 billion in the last couple of years. But some of those tax expenditures, some of those tax concessions aren't well directed, and the former Treasurer Costello, in one of his parting gestures, was to make that direction even less attractive by providing that opportunity to stack away $1 million in super and take it out tax-free later on. It might have simplified the taxation arrangements, but it did nothing for equity. So I think in terms of sequencing some changes, it's important to try to get a better tax arrangement within the 9% so that more of the tax preferment there goes to people on lower income groups, more needy people. And once that's sorted out, to press hard for some movement on the adequacy side, the 9% to the 12%, to go to 12%, or to start going to 12% now with all these inefficiencies and inequities in the current tax arrangements wouldn't make a lot of sense. But when they're sorted out, I think there are lots of reasons for contemplating some further progress, and lots of issues in all that, but there are lots of challenges too, and moving from 9 to 12%, even if part of that increase was to be dedicated towards providing for health expenditures in retirement, would be progress, because the way health costs are skyrocketing and contributing to that longevity that everyone is talking about, there's no way the public purse is going to be able to provide adequate health cover for the ageing population over the decades ahead. But some self-provision would be a way, through a related superannuation arrangement, would be a way of providing an opportunity for ordinary people to have access to that kind of assistance in their retirement. So it's important, and I hope it's not lost. I think the government has said at the outset that changing the 9% wasn't part of the Henry tax review, but there have been a few encouraging noises from Chris Bowen and a couple of others from the sideline that this is an option that shouldn't be brushed aside and should still be considered.